Peter Silvester. Peter Silvester had studied law as a young man in New York, and just before the American Revolution breaks out, well, about a decade before it breaks out, he moves to central New York and starts working as a personal attorney for Sir William Johnson. And I don't talk about Sir William Johnson enough on this channel, and I'm not going to talk about him too much now, but suffice to say, he was one of the most important people in central New York on the New York frontier. He had been there for years and made friends with the Native Americans, and he was really the branch between the Iroquois Nation and the British government in New York. Now, William Johnson ends up dying in 1774, just before the war breaks out, and he had been named Sir William Johnson by that point. He probably would have stuck with the British. His son ends up fighting with the British through the war, but he was a very important person and should be considered an American founder. I should do a video on him. We'll get there. Right now we're talking about Peter Silvester, and I brought up the importance of Sir William Johnson just to reiterate that Peter Silvester, as a very young man moving to central New York to work for William Johnson, helped him make extraordinary connections which would help him in the future. He wouldn't be... Silvester ends up, again, about the time of his employer's death. Peter Silvester had already moved to Kinderhook, New York, which is south of Albany on the Hudson River. And if it sounds familiar, I think I know why, and we're going to get to that. He ends up, by that point, by the time Johnson dies, Sylvester's already working with the New York Committee of Correspondence, and he's already kind of been radicalized. Now, he has a very minor role in the revolution itself. He does briefly serve in the New York Provincial Congress, but once independence is created, he ends up kind of backing off, and this seems to be because he married Jane Van Schack, and the Van Schack family was a very wealthy loyalist family, and Silvester was a proud patriot, but he didn't want to make too many waves in his own family, so he kept a little bit quiet. Now, it doesn't mean he wasn't important, because by the time hostilities are settling down, Peter Silvester is actually chosen as a judge on the County Court of Common Pleas, a very important local position to help settle regular debates that were legal. Let me say that again. To help make decisions legally. He actually ends up receiving an election to the state assembly and then really impresses people. And in 1789, he is chosen as an inaugural member of the United States House of Representatives. He is one of those first people to go to the first Congress. And he's only there for 2 sessions of Congress, and he serves as a Federalist, which is very important, especially in the swingy state of New York at the time. He ends up returning to the state government. He really has most of his success there, but as it says next to me, Peter Silvester educated a president. Now, Peter Silvester was back in Kinderhook, New York, running his private law practice, where he educated a lot of different people. And by the time he ends up becoming an older man, and a very young man, about 13 years old, boy, comes into his office to start learning from him. And that person's name was Martin Van Buren. And Martin Van Buren, as you might know, would eventually be president of the United States. And the reason you might recognize Kinderhook is Martin Van Buren would later be called Old Kinderhook, which legend has it is where we get the OK from, now that we say OK. Again, legend has it. Can't really confirm that. But it's under Silvester's tutelage from 13 until, I believe, 19 that Martin Van Buren learns not only the law, but learns how to dress properly, learns how to carry himself as a gentleman, and learns how to schmooze and move among the upper echelons of society. Interesting side note, Silvester was a Federalist and remained a Federalist, but under his tutelage, Van Buren decides to become a Democratic Republican anyway. And it is it is Peter Silvester and his son, I believe it was John Silvester, I don't remember his son's name, but they recommended he go to New York City and study under William P. Van Ness for a brief time, for his final year of studies, to learn politics from the side that he agreed with. Which, again, at the time, even at the time, it was fairly partisan politics, but to say, hey, go to the other party because that's who you agree with, it shows a lot about Peter Silvester's character. And from there, Peter Silvester lives off the rest of his life, and he is most notable for his association with and teaching of Martin Van Buren, despite his contributions to the American founding. So I hope you learned a little bit about Peter Silvester.